Okay, your mic is on now, Alina. We have Alina on remote.
Do you want to do you guys usually make motions to allow someone to participate
Yeah,
remotely?
we need to do that, but I haven't opened the meeting yet.
Okay, so when you're ready, we can do that.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up are the minutes for December 9th. The only thing I have is on page 3, which is the date for the school district meeting, which I believe is the 3rd, is that right?
That is correct.
And do you have a time now?
It's 6 p.m. The district committee meeting, yeah, 6 p.m.
Okay.
Jack, I believe you guys need to approve me first to participate remotely.
Yeah, that's correct.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor of allowing Alina to participate remotely?
Aye.
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 And I'm in, we have to do it in order. So Jen said aye.
Yep.
And Brian said aye.
Yes.
And Michelle said aye, and I said aye. And that's not the last time we'll do that. Any other amendments for the December 9 minutes? If not, is there a motion?
Second.
All in favor of accepting the minutes as amended, say aye.
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 And I'm in.
Basically, that was
Yeah.
roll call. We all did it one at a time.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you want me to call the names to do it?
No, I mean theoretically we should going forward, but no.
Okay.
Alina?
I have,
Abstain.
All right, she wasn't here.
minutes are accepted as amended. Committee reports. Jen, do you have anything for us from the select board?
Yes. So we will be presenting the last budgets that came before select board tonight. The town administrator budget, we'll get to that later, but the select board would request that BudCom approve that as approved at select board. We think that the preliminary budget as approved by us will be sufficient. We are in the process of continuing interviews for the town administrator position. And so that's going pretty well, and we're optimistic about that. And we feel that that budget will probably work well enough for us without having to make significant changes to it. So we can talk about that when we get into the budgets. I did, after last week's meeting, send out some of the background information from Dragon Mosquito Control that was requested. That goes through day by day what Dragon did at various properties in Brentwood, because some of the board members wanted to take a look at that. So that went out by mail. I also sent around a letter from Casella, which I will address during the waste collection and disposal budget. And kind of big picture from the select board, we had a preliminary budget drafted for us way back in October. And then as we've gone through the budgets, we have obviously tried to limit budget increases where we could. But unfortunately, as you'll find out later tonight, the waste collection budget surprised us a little bit. And so as we look at our total bottom line budget, it is higher than the select board would like and higher than what we want to bring to the voters. So now that we have sort of that, assuming they all get approved tonight at the current rate, what Letty and I have been working on is actually going through the budget line by line and trying to decide where we can make some small adjustments that are going to help bring that total number down. We also have some ideas about using some of our ARPA funds to help over the next couple of years. We have 2 more budget years that we can use some of that ARPA to offset taxes. We have a few other changes that we're considering. So going to try to get the total budget number down. Our goal that we kind of talk about amongst ourselves is we want it to be a single-digit increase if at all possible. Obviously, when it gets above 10%, that starts getting pretty heavy. And so we are working on that. It's probably going to take over the next couple of weeks for us to bring those changes to select board, talk with department heads, and then I think probably for your January meeting, for this meeting in January, we probably will have brought back some suggestions and might ask that BudCom reopen certain budgets and revote on some budgets that have been downsized slightly. So just for everybody to have kind of their head that that's what we intend to do. We know that there's some places we just don't have the ability to cut, but there's other places where we potentially might be able to make a lot of little cuts here and there to help us bring our total budget down, which is what we're hoping to do.
So our January meeting is scheduled for the 27th, which is
I think that's right.
later than I would really like to have the final numbers in order to work.
27th, yep.
In order to work with those numbers before the public hearing.
We can certainly, I mean, we could reconsider. I think that Letty and I are going to bring some preliminary suggestions to select board tomorrow, but I don't think we'll be ready to vote on them tomorrow. So then that would go into January. We could certainly discuss having a BudCom meeting earlier if BudCom wants to kind of go through the nitty gritty of some of those cuts and get on board with what select board has decided.
Well, we have trouble getting everybody together early in the month, but that may still be the best option for us. So the sooner you can come to us with that information, then we'll at the end of the meeting tonight, we'll look at some dates that maybe we can work out
Okay.
to get to the final numbers well before the 27th, I hope.
Sure.
So.
We will certainly do our best. It will take a little time just to make sure, we don't want to inadvertently cut anything that's going to cause a departmental problem.
Yep.
So we do need to, some of the larger cuts need to really work with the department heads to make sure that we're going to be okay to have enough wiggle room, but to try to bring that total bottom line down.
Understood. Yep.
And I think those were all the big picture announcements that I had.
Okay, one quickie. Street lighting. Did we deliberately cut that out of the budget?
Oh,
or
no, we did actually approve streetlight for its standard $1 last week.
Right.
We actually don't know why it got left off the appointment schedule. It was probably an error.
Okay.
So if you would be willing to entertain that $1 budget tonight,
Let's do that.
We would appreciate that. Sorry, I completely forgot about that.
Okay.
We're still running on the assumption that that budget is really just a kind of emergency placeholder because
Yep.
we've never had to pay anything out of that line, but we did leave it at that $1.
Okay. Thank you, Jen.
Yep.
Brian, anything happening at the school?
Nothing beyond what we'll discuss for the budget.
Yeah.
So, so we're doing that. I don't have a copy of the agenda that I can find. So is that what we're doing now?
No. Okay. Well, if that's all you want to talk about, if that's all you've got,
It's
then
probably enough.
We'll incorporate a bunch of different things into it, but there's a good amount to discuss.
Okay.
so.
Okay. Then let's go to the Swayze budget at this point.
Okay. So everyone here in the room has 2 documents in front of them relating to the Swayze budget. One of them should be folded open to a pie chart that Molly created. That pie chart is the only reason you have 2 documents because the packet I created did not include the pie chart. So really the easiest thing to do is to work from the document the front page of the other document, the Swayze FY26 proposed budget. The pie chart tells you where all the money in that budget is going. The summary sheet, which is that first page, has the total budget for we're asking for fiscal year 2026, which is $459,745. That budget, because it incorporates the solar project bond, represents a 5.38% increase from the prior year's budget. The summary document explains where significant changes are occurring, and the percentage change can look somewhat misleading. For example, it looks like there's a giant increase in student body activity spending of 16.6%, but that's an increase from $12,000 to $14,000. That student body activities encompasses the Alnoba retreat for the fifth graders before they go out to CMS, as well as student activities that kids love, like Take Apart Club, Jump Rope Club, other things of that. I'm missing anything else? Nope. All the extracurriculars. So anyway, you'll see that from a dollar perspective, the biggest increases are regular education, and that is the line that includes staff salaries, as well as special education. That also involves some staff salary.
The large dollar change for special education is for an anticipated placement within New Hampshire, but outside of Swayze School.
Is that new, or is that, has that been ongoing?
New this year. It's ongoing now.
And do we continue to take care of special ed students at Swayze also?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
But certain ones require
That's correct.
other attention. Okay,
That's right.
got it.
So anyway, the increases in regular education, that also includes contractual. So there's a teacher contract, which for the teachers, their contract ends in 2026. So we'll probably negotiate their next contract next fall. And the paraprofessionals have a contract too that runs through 2027. We want to make sure those contracts renew on different years and don't come due at the same time. The other big percentage change is the bond expense. And you can see at the top of the summary sheet that if you subtract out the bond expense from the budget, it's a 3.99% increase. And following the summary sheet, you have a line-by-line budget for where the funds are going.
Brian, can you remind us how long the bond is for the solar?
7 years.
7?
And also as part of your package, your paper-clipped package, there's a bond repayment schedule attached to that. And I do have some nuance to add to that. The board met tonight prior to this meeting to authorize going to the market to get the bond. The authorization that we voted on authorized bond interest payments of up to 4.25%. The bond interest payments on that schedule are 3.75%, which is what the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank estimated the repayment to be. The agreement has up to 4.25 to allow for some flexibility for the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank. However, based on what Molly has seen and where rates have been going recently, it is likely that our rate will be, or it's highly possible, I don't want to say likely, I don't want to overpromise, it's quite possible that our bond rate will be below the 3.75% that's on that repayment schedule. But we won't know this for certain until January. And I apologize that there's a lot of moving parts. This whole bond process involved a lot of moving parts. But I think by the end of January, okay, so the bond sale will be January 15th, so we'll know on January 15th what our actual rate will be, and when we meet again on January 27th, we'll have a definite number.
So that budget line item might go down for
It
the
may go
final
down.
version of the budget. Okay.
Yes. And one other piece I wanted to add some nuance on, which is on special ed. So at our last meeting, we talked about the announcement from the Education Commissioner about reducing the amount of reimbursement from the state. That reimbursement only applies to student spending that is equal to 3.5 times the average annual special ed spending per student. So you need to have a student that is costing the district about $77,000 per year. So we have not had students that have met that requirement, and the school has not applied for state reimbursement funding recently and did not apply for any funding this year. So at present, we don't see an effect from that change in policy. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. Okay.
So for the if there's a student that's going to be outplaced, that potentially might be one that might be impacted if it goes above that dollar value. But
I
there's
think-
no current students that we know of that it would impact.
I think that is fair to say.
Okay.
Where do they go? Are they still within New Hampshire,
Yes.
commuting distance from Brentwood, let's say? Is that, I mean, they're not overnight kind of,
No.
okay.
And then two other items to draw your attention to that are in the paper-clipped packet at the end. These are things that Jack has already circulated. There are two documents related to the solar project. Beyond the bond repayment schedule. One is a anticipated value of solar energy to the grid and energy production from the array. And then the next page after that has a blue, it's a spreadsheet with a blue line across the top, 2 yellow stripes sort of in the middle. Then the next page, which has some orange text on it, that is the anticipated sort of break-even schedule. So what we'll be paying in bond repayments going forward, and basically after year 10, we'll start to see significant savings from the program.
Will it actually be year 10, or will it be year 7 when the bond is paid off?
I'm going to defer to Chris on this. I'm reading the spreadsheet that says year 10.
And I know when the public hearing was had where solar got approved, there was some confusion about the federal rebate that will be coming in. I know I see it listed on here. Was that clarified that that's just that's a lump sum payment from the federal government?
This is yet another item about which there's still a lot
There's still
of
a little confusion?
unknowns.
Okay.
Molly's been doing an awful lot of research to try and find out when that will be paid, how it will be paid, and I don't think she has any clear answers, but if you want to come up and share what you do know, that would be appreciated.
You can sit on the end here.
Or you
if
can come
want,
right here,
Molly.
yeah.
So I did have conversations with them as recent as today. And so they were saying I've done all the registration that needed to be done, and then they said the next step in the process is what they call interconnection, which is different. Everyone seems to have a different definition of interconnection. But it means when it's up and working.
Right.
And so I reached out to them again today to ask what the next steps are in the process. I do think it will be a lump sum. Now, I'm not 100% sure. And also the timing of it is still up in the air because we've heard various different scenarios. And the person that I was talking with at the Clean Energy Commission, they were saying the very, very, very first people that applied for it just got it back. And so they've actually reached out to them to see how long it took them, and they haven't gotten that response yet. So still working through it, but they're very hopeful about it. And we do have the bond for the full amount, and then if we
got a check, would we just use that to pay down the principal? Is that the idea?
you can't prepay the bond, but
Yeah.
we would be able to I'll have to work with the auditors to see exactly if we could hold on to it and just like lower payments going forward, or if that amount would be put towards the bond instead of, and then it would eventually be given back in the tax rate. So we'll just have to work that with the auditors.
Okay.
But it will be given back in the tax rate one way or another.
One way or the other, it's
Yes.
So presumably,
decreasing the price of the project, no matter what.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's just the mechanics, if it happens all in 1 year or over 6 years.
Gotcha.
okay. On the capital improvement plan, you had listed $50,000 for roof repair, $45,000 for library exterior doors, and $30,000 for field maintenance. Is that included in the budget that we're looking at?
The project in the operating budget is for the library doors. Actually, the library doors we're doing this year, it's the sidewalk repair, which is in this budget.
Okay. And the field maintenance and the roof repair is also in this budget?
No,
Or-
I don't believe so. The roof's been done, but not the field.
Okay. So I guess, are there plans for warrant articles to be pursued for the fields or
That hasn't
anything?
been a topic of discussion. I think, could come in future budgets. Chris? Yeah. Yeah.
Come on up.
In the budget, Jack, you'll see in the facilities, there is a project line. That's where we look at it, and then it'll be a needs basis. So we have, if any other significant budget, facilities projects do not come up, then we'd earmark it for the field maintenance. So right now, we have an overall project line, and we've been able to systematically repair the roof, do the door replacements. There are some safety and security things that we discussed, but we'll prioritize it with the board once this budget is passed of what we would do next.
Okay, so we're not going to see warrant articles?
You will not.
That will jump these numbers?
There is
in
no
any
other
way?
warrant articles that we would
Okay.
be planning.
Okay, good, thank you.
Welcome.
Do you have an idea when the solar panels will begin to produce?
Well, the hope is they'll be connected by the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, that's right. Most of the arrays have already been assembled, and they're doing the wiring right now. So everything should be set up, but then operational, I'm hoping in January.
Okay.
We had some pictures taken on one section a few weeks ago, and you can't tell they're doing any work because you're on the ground. So it was phenomenal to see one wing of the building already completed. So they're going to take some more pictures this week. I can share it with Brian. Maybe he can show it at one of the budget meetings. But they've been excellent to work with, I have to say.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, photos would be great.
Yep.
So on the first line, regular education, are you maintaining the same number of teachers, would you say, or?
Yes. Yeah, there's no additional teachers or staff in this budget except for paraprofessionals. There is an additional paraprofessional in this budget.
I was surprised to see that special education is essentially half of the regular education budget. I presume for a lot fewer
There's-
students.
There's definitely a lot less staff in the special education budget.
I didn't mean it should be equal. I was just surprised that it needed to be as high as it is. So,
I think in most cases, students who have IEPs are required by law to provide services in those IEPs. So there's not, once a student is assessed as having particular needs, there's not a great deal of flexibility around that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's,
No, absolutely.
so it's,
Other comments, questions from the committee? Is there a
I just have a general question about how this budget is prepared. Is this prepared by the SAU and then brought to the Swayze board?
yes,
Or
it is. Well, I don't want to discount Principal Q's involvement. I mean, the document you see here with the line by line, Molly prepares that, and that's one of the services the SAU provides for all of the schools, is that business office performs this kind of thing. But the great deal of work from Principal Q, Principal Gallo, others on staff to assess what the needs are, identify needs, everything from, you know, new library books to adequate supplies to do we have enough paras based on student needs, things like that. That all comes from Ron and the building staff.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion for the 7,459,745.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Elena has
They
seconded.
tied.
This is our custom. We'll open for public comment before we vote. If there's anyone in the public that would like to make a comment, come up to a mic, please. You can use, yeah, either one.
Just as a point of interest to, you know, taxpayers, and I know this information will come out in the town report, what has been the student population change, Delta, say, over the last 2 or 3 years?
So this was actually part of the packet shared with the board and apparently just handed to you now. So we've seen a slight decline over the past 8 years or so. In the past 2 or 3 years, a decline of about 9 or 10, but going back to 2021, we're down 5 students overall. So in the past 5 years, it's been relatively steady in the 230 to 245 range. But the overall statewide, you're seeing fewer children in schools.
And just the average number of special ed students versus regular population?
Again, I think that's also consistent across the state. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're, yeah, consistent. If you want to.
So for Swayze, it's over 50 students.
Over 50. And then I guess, I don't know what the proper budgetary verbiage is, but basically I call it like an unexpended fund balance at the end of the school year, appropriated versus spent. You know, what came back, if anything, to the town?
So we have, Molly provides us that data every meeting, typically. So what we gave the past 2 or 3 years is usually available. So it might take me a minute to find that in my materials here, which are not.
Okay, just be interesting to hear. And then to have the taxpayers understand, if there is unexpended fund balance at the end of the year or near the end of the year, say a month or two beforehand, is that how these special projects get funded? Like library doors, I'm not sure, you know, what all these things are, or field maintenance. So if you find, say, 60 days prior to the end of the fiscal year, does the school board then take that money and use that to perform projects that we haven't been told about prior?
So we do have reserve funds that we keep balances in. So we have Safety and Security Reserve Fund, a Special Education Reserve Fund.
I guess I'm more interested in just general projects like field work, sidewalk work.
I think we like to budget for those things and make a plan for those.
Will be.
I think if something came up which was in high demand, really necessary at that point in time, then the board would have that conversation.
Oh, and I realize you have the legal right to do that. I was just interested in how things work. So in terms of thinking about the budget for the next year, the taxpayers can understand what wasn't actually spent in the previous year, and then how are those decisions made to spend that money versus return it to taxpayers?
So we have I guess I want to say two things. One, we have the capital improvement plan, the town capital improvement plan that we submit items to at the beginning of the year. And then if we can't pay for some of those things through our normal maintenance project budget, so some like new kitchen supplies, for example, then that might be on the town capital improvement plan. At the end of the year, we'll look at what did we spend out of our existing balance for capital improvement or facilities and maintenance, for example. I may be using inexact terms.
Right.
I apologize if so.
The capital improvement plan is a plan to looking ahead 7 years, or
Yeah.
5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, but the budget, the amount of money you actually have to spend is determined based on your, what is left in that unexpended fund balance.
And we have target, so as far as those reserve funds for things like maintenance, safety and security, and special ed, we have targets that we want to have for balances. So for the special ed, for example, I think we targeted to have a full year of an out-of-school placement as the budgeted balance in case something happened at the beginning of the year and we weren't budgeted for it. And I think we've set different targets based on board discussions for those other funds. And once those reserve funds are appropriately budgeted according to our discussions, then we'll put the rest of the funds back to the returned to taxpayers.
All right, well, thank you. Just interesting.
Excuse me, Bruce,
Learn how
just
to work.
identify yourself, would you please?
Excuse me?
Just identify yourself.
Bruce Stevens, South Road.
Thank you.
And sorry, just because I found it, because Allison found it too, just to give credit for us looking for it. Amount returned to taxpayers varies from year to year. So 22-23, we returned $101,221 to taxpayers. In 21-22, it was $328,352. 2021, $225,472, and 2019-2020 returned $87,514.
Can you either give that to me or repeat that a little slower? so
Um,
I can type that?
I can give it to you because
That's
that would be
perfect.
easier.
Yes, thank you.
From being the select board rep to the school for the past 2 years before this year, in general, the school almost always returns it directly to the taxpayers rather than using it for other projects, in my experience. That's generally their sort of guiding view, is to return any extra money to the taxpayers, unless there was some sort of an emergency. Yeah. Yeah, in general, I've not seen the school board have that sort of worldview that they would use that extra money for any pet projects. It's generally always returned to the taxpayer when it can be. Yep. It's a different world, different budget.
We have a motion and a second. We've had public comment. Now, we're going to vote, and Jen,
Yes. Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Michelle,
Nay.
Alina,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate your help, and we do recognize that Brentwood has the lowest cost per student still among the SAU. So congratulations to that performance, and
Thank you, everybody.
and it's an award-winning
Thank you.
school too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Molly.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Becky and Laura, I believe, have some information for us.
Good evening, Becky Dunham, Chair of the Regional Associations Committee. Our budget request was presented to the Budget Committee and the Select Board at the beginning of the season. I think it was in October when we came before you. We asked for a level funding of $18,000, which is what we've had for the last 2 years. And the applications we received this year between Labor Day and October 30, that's the application period that's posted online on the town website, we received 5 applications, a couple fewer than we have in previous years. So we met last Thursday, which is traditional, to review each application, its completeness, how many residents are served, et cetera, and we discovered that we are not going to, our vote resulted in not using all of the $18,000. We made sure that everyone had the opportunity to apply. It was pretty much level funded by everyone, and I think part of that is the larger organizations that apply to us, such as Waypoint and SNHS, have recently received from the state and federal government an influx of money. So they're not feeling the pressure that a small organization might. They are, for instance, SNHS, their budget doubled when the state or the federal government doubled the amount of money for homelessness. So it went up another $20 million. So we're not feeling there's going to be any pressure from them. We've met the funding of every request this year, 5, and we would like to ask for our budget be reduced down to $13,000 from $18,000. We are spending $12,537. So I think that's a reasonable request. We have met every request for budget year 2025. We vote in 1 year for the subsequent year. So our request is going that if the select board would reduce it, or the budget committee would reduce it to $13,000.
This is very unique.
It's a nice request to have.
We're not familiar with how to handle this, Becky.
I know how.
Oh, no. It's very easy. You just open the budget and you vote on the new number. It's easy as pie. And in fact, she's talking about one particular line item, which is the 800 line in the welfare budget, to go from 18,000 to 13,000. So if somebody does want to reopen that budget, that would be us dropping the entire welfare budget from 25,407 to 20,407 to take that $5,000 out that they are not in need of. And I'd be happy to make a motion to reopen the welfare budget for a new vote.
Say the numbers again.
We approved it at 25,407. So by removing $5,000 from that line, it would go down to 20,407
Got it.
Second that.
to reopen the budget.
Yes.
So we should take a vote on
Yeah,
reopening the
and so
budget.
And so Jen opened it and you seconded it?
Yep.
Okay. All in favor? No, not all in favor.
It's annoying when you have to do roll call
I
votes.
know, I know. So Jen,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Alina,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
and I'm an aye.
Thank you.
Okay, it's reopened. Now I'll make a motion to approve that budget at the new number at 20,407.
Is there a second? Okay. We have a motion and a second. As is our
Anyone opposed to us decreasing a budget?
public comment.
Doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like it.
Okay. Then we'll vote. All in, Jen,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Alina,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. So the motion passes to reduce the budget by $5,000 to $20,407. Thank you, Becky, for that.
May I make another comment?
Yes.
Laura Hasher is here. She's been on the committee since the committee was created, and she's been a wonderful resource on that committee, her background and her experience. And one of the issues we raised at our meeting last week was the process of paying out the fund to the organizations we've supported. So we're streamlining that process next year. We're recommending that instead of having the organizations, after they're notified they were funded, sending a note asking for the money. We're talking about sending the money out, and it was Laura's good suggestion, right after the April 15 deadline. So there's a lot less staff work to do that. They would just automatically generate the check. So it would decrease staff time allocated to doing the processing.
Perfect.
So,
Very good.
yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Laura, also.
Would Laura like to add anything to this? I should ask her because she's. Yep.
Okay, we'd like to make a habit of these kinds of reductions here, and
We're gonna try. Well, those little, I mean, those little things help. It adds up.
that's about what we need across the board.
When you've got a
frankly.
20-page budget, it adds up, every little one. Do you want to move on to the insurance budget?
Okay, next up is insurance.
Okay.
So,
There's two insurance benefits. The one, they're both called insurance, but the one we're going to talk about first is actually the one that starts with the property and liability. So this is non-health insurance. This budget covers our property and liability insurance, our workers' comp, unemployment, and insurance deductible. And so these are contracted rates through New Hampshire Primex. And so you see some increases on our property liability line, in our workers' comp line. Those are contractual. In terms of unemployment compensation, we did have a discussion at the board. Traditionally, the select board in the town has not budgeted any significant dollar value for unemployment wages. We've been relatively lucky. You know, it's not something that the town has had to pay a lot. In the preliminary budget that came out in October, when our town administrator was still here, she had recommended we potentially fund that line with some money to cover us for unemployment. We felt relatively confident that if we do have one or two unemployment claims, that we can probably absorb that elsewhere in the budget or in a salary line. So that's one place that the select board did cut, and cut that line down to just $1 as a placeholder, and felt pretty comfortable that we could get by with doing that. On the insurance deductible, we did make a change there. This would be if we had a court settlement or lost a judgment in court, that the first $5,000 of that judgment would be a deductible that had to be paid by the town. Because we do have a case right now that may go to court or may be settled, we felt that it was judicious to actually budget for the full deductible in the unfortunate case that we do have to pay a settlement. We are hoping not to, obviously, but we wanted to have that buffer there of that $5,000. So we did raise that line item while cutting the unemployment line. So what you see mostly in this budget is the reflection of the contractual increases from Primex of property liability and workers' comp. Some of that is related to Brentwood specific factors, but some of that is just market influences of the insurance market. So you do see this budget go up by 16.6%, or about $26,496. And unfortunately, other than that unemployment line, there's not really significant wiggle room for cuts here. And I'm happy to answer any other questions about this if there are any, to the best of my ability.
So the deductible line, you're saying that the $5,000 is our full deductible?
Correct.
That's what you're saying?
Yep.
And there is a case pending?
Correct.
Is that anything you can explain?
I don't think that usually we would talk about legal matters in public settings. And certainly if that's something that ends up getting settled, that will become public, but it's a pending litigation, so I don't feel comfortable talking about that. It's something that's been going on for a number of years. It's not new. Any other questions I can answer?
if there are no other questions or comments from the committee, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Public comment?
again, Becky Dunham, just as private citizen. A few years ago, former administrator came to me and said she was going to create a committee to review health insurance plans. I don't think that ever came to fruition. Is there thought of doing that in the future, given that health insurance changes so much, and if we had a chance to explore that for next year, that might work out? It just never materialized that year.
This year, we explored trying to tie ourselves in with the teachers' agreement, which
Okay.
they have a lower rate.
Okay,
Unfortunately, that was not going to be doable because all the towns in the SAU were going to have to be on board at
On
the
board,
same
yeah.
time.
okay.
So
I
we're
think-
open to.
I think that's a absolutely
Yeah.
reasonable and important thing that we should do. It doesn't relate to this budget specifically. It relates to
Right.
the other health insurance
Right.
budget, which is a huge,
Yes.
it's 10% of our
Yes.
total budget.
Yes.
And so once we get a new town administrator in place, I absolutely think that should be one of the discussion points on the table if there is some changes we could make.
Yeah.
We did discuss maybe a year ago at the select board, making some changes to what the employee contribution was versus the town.
Yeah.
The feeling at that time, it was as we were just coming off of the high inflation of COVID, is that asking our employees to pay more for either deductibles or higher percentage would be unfavorable from a competitive nature with other towns, because other towns in general offer fairly generous benefits. But I think those are all moving parts that the town could discuss moving forward.
One other question, it's something that Jack and I had worked on a couple of years ago, was presenting to each employee a summary of their entire package. Most of us get that from our employees. We don't breach any confidentiality. It's so that each employee can see the total package that the town is responsible for paying for. It includes Social Security, FIC, all of those things. And I think that's a useful tool for any organization to really get a handle on what the comprehensive packet is per employee. So I would also recommend with the new administrator, we might consider that too.
Yeah, that's easy
And
enough to
Jack
do.
was fully on board with this.
Yeah.
We worked on it.
Some of those numbers are already known pretty easily by the employee by looking at their pay stub. But for example, like the town contribution to health insurance is not
Yes.
as easily transparent to the employee
Yep.
without us providing that.
So a full
Reasonable.
summary of packet.
Very
yes.
reasonable.
Becky and I submitted really two
samples.
systems
Yep.
for doing this.
Yeah, my employer does the same thing.
To Karen, and
Yep.
for whatever reason, it didn't get implemented last year, but
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable.
certainly wholeheartedly with the new administrator.
Sure.
Yep, I think comparison is always valuable.
Thanks for
you.
bringing that up.
I think that would be good information for this board to see as well.
I'm not sure that individual employee numbers could be shared in a public setting, but the cumulative could absolutely be shared with the public and with the other committees.
We did receive that in the past.
I don't think it was broken down by employee though, right? It was like a
Well, it
total.
wasn't broken down. It was a total number.
Yeah.
Per employee.
Was it
So we didn't-
de-identified?
We didn't necessarily see what their health insurance was. We saw what their combined
Oh, okay.
health insurance, everything, so it didn't really.
Okay, yeah, we can certainly talk with the new town administrator once they're in place about what information can be shared while still respecting employee privacy.
Becky and I we could resubmit what we submitted before as a guideline, which our administrator at that time liked.
Yeah.
Just didn't get.
Yeah, I think it just never
just
got
didn't-
off the ground.
Just didn't get it implemented. Okay, we have a motion and second for $186,111 for property and liability insurance. And now let's see if I can actually do a roll call vote here. Jen?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Alina?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Letty, can you come in? I'm gonna have Letty come in for the health insurance because she was the board member that was absolutely crucial and indispensable in making sure our employees are still going to have appropriate health and dental and other coverage in the future. So I'm going to invite her up. What you see in front of you is the insurance budget, which covers health insurance. It covers dental insurance, short-term disability, life, and it also, we offer a small cash payment to any of our employees who choose not to have town insurance, which is called in lieu of insurance. And that is taxable, which is why you see a FICA Medicare line down at the bottom. And so Letty will present some of the details. We did make a decision, Letty and I, that I consulted with another town administrator from another town, that the way we had been doing our health insurance benefits was a little inconsistent in the way we were doing our line items. So we did clean that up a little bit this year, which did allow us to shrink this budgetary increase a little bit by just reflecting the true cost to the town. And Letty can maybe discuss that if there's questions about that.
Yeah, should I guess, do you all have this? Did you send this to everyone, Jack?
Yes, that went out.
I sent whatever I received. Yes,
Okay.
mine is in color. Yours is not?
Mine is,
It is in color.
Far away.
Okay, got it.
because I know that in the past, there's been requests from this budget committee to have kind of a table of what the different options are and how much they cost the employee and how much they cost the town. So that is what this does. It outlines, there's 2 medical plans, there's single, couple, family coverage for both, the number of people that elect to take each of those, and so the first column is the invoice number, which is the amount, the total amount that gets charged, and then that's broken out into the town cost and employee cost. Those are decided per the employee handbook, so it's 100% for a single person, 75% for a couple, and 75% for the family. I think that's it.
So this is kind of those cumulative numbers you were talking about, Michelle, in terms of what proportion we pay versus the employee.
Yes, and then I also added, because I know that there probably uses some changes over the course of the year, I also added a buffer of 3 additional families going on the most expensive plan for both medical and dental.
Right, because we always budget for that on
Yep.
the assumption that we have new employees coming on.
Yep. Or if a current employee that maybe wasn't taking insurance decides to take our insurance and
Right.
switch over for some reason, so. Yes.
Is this through Primex also, or is this?
No, this is
something
through
different?
Health Trust.
And the reason you see this budget only go up 2.48% is because of the way that we listed these line items, which was cleaning it up a little bit. In previous years' budgets, the employee contribution was reflected in some of these lines, and that's not a true cost to the taxpayer. And so we cleaned that up to really just reflect the town's component. So even though our health insurance plans are going up about 8% maximal, you only see a 2.48% here, mostly because of us just slightly changing the methodology from year prior to what we feel is more accurate.
We had a very substantial increase last year.
The year prior had been 15.8, I want to say, almost, yeah, above 15%. So this year was about half
What a
that.
change.
But then that wouldn't have really been accurate then, if you're saying that previously.
Well,
employee
it was
portion were in-
accurate, it's just that there was revenue offset, and we thought that really just cleaning it up so that you didn't have those revenue offsets here really more reflects the true cost. The other thing that happened that year is it wasn't just that we went up by 15%, is we had a very high number of additional enrollees that either aged off their parents' insurance, got married, had a baby, et cetera. And so we had, part of the increase that year was contractual cost and part was true covered lives cost. This year, it's mostly contractual costs. We don't have a lot of change. In fact, we have 2 full-time employees who have recently parted ways with the town. So that actually decreased some of these line items, which is why there is a buffer in there on the assumption that we may have some new hires that will put that back up. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, what you were
Nope,
going to say.
yep.
That's what you were saying. Okay, I
So
read
this
her
re-
mind.
This reflects the revenue offsets that are involved.
I mean, so it's not really a revenue offset. Basically what it is that when we pay employees, their salary is accounted for in the different budgets. And when we withhold their insurance, it never really goes anywhere. Like, it's not new. it stays here with us. So we were kind of double counting it before.
Okay. Questions, comments from the committee about health benefits? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Public comment? Being no public comment, once again, I'll try to do a name calling here. Jen?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Helena?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Great, thank you. I think so.
Thank you for that, Letty, calculation there. So the next item, obviously, there's a huge number of typos on this.
Oh, I wish. I wish there were typos on this. So what the public needs to be aware of is that we had a 5-year contract with Casella, and that contract went from 2019 to 2015. So when that contract was set in 2019, it was before the COVID pandemic occurred, before global unprecedented inflation occurred, and Casella was not able to adjust their contracts because we and other towns were in 5-year contractual agreements. So we had a normal like step adjustment in those contracts, but it did not compare to the escalated costs that Casella was responsible for. And so now that we are up for another 5-year contract, you see some significant increases here. There is a letter from Brian at Casella, which I distributed to everyone, and they also got by email. And I'm happy just to review it for the public. So Brian Groshin, who's the market area manager from Casella, we had asked him for the public and the BudComs and the select board's benefit to really describe why we are seeing some of these significant increases in these budgets. We're seeing about a 38% increase in the rubbish collection and about 104% increase in the recycling. And what he had to share with us was that since the inception of the current curbside collection contract, Casella has experienced significant amount of inflation related to labor, equipment, disposal, and other costs. The current agreement that had been in place had an annual rate adjustment at a fixed 4%. This increase did not keep pace with the cost increases experienced. To control the impact of these cost increases, Casella has been converting several municipalities from manual to automated curbside collection. This is a more efficient form of collection that allows us to control our labor costs. It's also significantly safer, which mitigates our exposure to worker comp claims. Below are highlights of the variances of the original agreement versus the new proposal. The first is that their cost of labor went up by 25%, higher than they expected it to be in the final year of their contract. This was related to cost increases in wages, employee benefits, workers' comp, et cetera. We can commiserate with that because we've had increases in all of those areas as well. Operating costs are 54% higher today than they had expected them to be in the final year of their contract. This was related to cost increases in equipment, maintenance, insurance, facilities, environmental, and permitting. In addition to the cost increases described above, the amount of time we expected to complete routes had gone up 18% higher than we originally assumed it would be. Overall, this has led to an overall cost increase in manual collection of 56% versus 42% for automated collection. For automated collection, the rate increase also includes each household receiving 1 Casella cart for trash and 1 Casella cart for recycling. These carts are fully maintained by Casella. The town may be eligible for a recycling partnership grant worth approximately $25,000 with the conversion to automated collection. So while this is unwelcome information, I think it is helpful information for why these costs are up. The way we set the budget is we averaged the cost of automated and manual. So we essentially assumed that we would continue on manual for the next 6 months and then would convert to automated collection next summer. We thought that that transition would be much easier once we had a new town administrator in place who was settled and could help us with that transition. And so the numbers that you see reflected on the rubbish collection line and the recycling line basically is a 50-50 of the two numbers that were quoted by us by Casella, the more expensive manual number and the slightly less expensive automated number. And that's how we came up with the budget that you see in front of you. And the select board shares the sticker shock that you are experiencing. This is a contract that expires in 13 days or so, 14 days. And I think the hope had been to go out to bid for this contract in the summer, and that did not occur. And so our hands are a bit tied into needing to sign this 5-year contract with Casella. And that is the situation that we are in.
So our general information, particularly from Andy Artemovich's research, is that other towns have experienced similar
Yes.
increases. Can we get some of that information?
Did he share any of those emails?
Not with us.
You? I had seen a couple of them. Yeah, he had reached out to a couple of towns that were relatively similar to ours. Of course, it's hard to compare exactly because towns are different sizes and have different tonnage amounts and things like that. Let me see what I can pull up to you.
I'm particularly interested in Fremont, Danville, and
Fremont.
and Northampton.
Fremont is in the first year of the new contract. And their budget is $320,000. So less than ours, but they are, I think, a little bit smaller town. Kingston's budget was $477,000.
Wait, and that is for all three parts here, recycling, collection, and landfill?
Oh, you know what? No, it's probably for the first two. So where our number is 505, Kingston's is 477, so quite similar. Fremont's 320. They both use waste management and are 100% automated, so they're experiencing some cost savings from automation. This is just the information I have. I think those, looks like the two towns maybe that Andy spoke with was Kingston and Fremont. And so, especially, Kingston was relatively, within $30,000 or so of our contract. So I don't think we are the only town experiencing these type of increases.
So I don't think we're going to get a new contract
We are not.
within 13 days.
No, we are
And
not.
we can't survive without trash collection here. But I would also, if he could check with Northampton, which is an identical population to us, and also Danville, that would be helpful.
I'm sure he could, but I don't know that it will make any difference to whether we decide to pass this.
I
budget.
agree with you, but I think it would be helpful for us to know where we're at.
Sure.
Hey, Jack,
Go ahead, you're on the mic.
question. So, Jen, you're talking about switching to automated collection in the summer. If I'm just looking at the letter, it says 1 cart for trash and 1 for recycling.
Yep.
So the households are going to be limited to those 2 carts, and how big are they?
Yes, they come in a variety of different sizes. The biggest size, which is what Casella recommends for most towns, is, I want to say, 96 gallons, I think they quoted us, significantly larger than the black, traditional trash barrel that many homeowners use, and likely to actually reflect increase in the amount of trash and recycling that could theoretically be put on the curb. But some of that is, we can negotiate some of that with them based on what size we think works best for the town. And then there is the ability to do some exceptions for individual households that need more bins or more access. It's unclear if there's any way to do an exception to offer somebody smaller bins. I think we would need to work out those details with Casella when we're ready to go automated.
I guess my question was more along the line, like we paid by a ton, right? And if we were gonna limit the amount of trash that is gonna be picked up at any given time, wouldn't that limit the number of tons? So shouldn't it bring our cost a little more down?
No, I don't think moving to automated would decrease our tonnage. That was not the idea. The idea was to keep it, to allow, I think now, I forget what it is, 8 bags or something that people are allowed. The idea was to keep the amount that people can put on the curb the same, or if anything, allow a little bit of extra space rather than to contract the amount that homeowners could put on the curb. That's my understanding.
And what is the normal town RFP process? Like, did we miss this because of the issue that we were dealing with, or did we miss it even before that issue?
I can't really speak to why it did not happen. The board was not aware that it needed to happen and was not happening. So I can't really speak much more than that, other than to say that it did not occur as it should have. And honestly,
Is there an option?
I'm not sure it would have made a big budgetary difference, given that the other towns around us who are on waste management are having similar contracts. I don't think that who knows what we would have found in an RFP, but looking at some of our neighbors who are on different companies, they appear to be relatively similar.
Right, but we also haven't had an RFP. So is there an option to negotiate, let's say, 1-year contract and then come back to the table, essentially to allow the town to have that RFP process and review options?
I think if my understanding from talking to Andy is that if we wanted to do a 1-year contract, it would be significantly more expensive.
Well, I mean, they're not that cheap right now either.
Well,
Correct.
I don't remember if it was this person that came.
Brian, I think it was.
Okay, so didn't he say that he was extending our current contract for some certain amount of time because we didn't?
He
go
was
through the proper
extending
process?
us to stay on manual rather than mandating we go automated at the beginning of this 5-year contract, which would be their preference. They would prefer us to go to automated like on January 1st.
Yes, but
we're
I
going
thought
to
they
let
were
us.
giving us like an extension.
I think there
basically,
was-
like not requiring us to get into a new
I
contract.
think there was a
immediately.
discussion of doing that, and in the end, that was not offered. I think the compromise was that we would not have to go to manual right away, that we would be given up to 6 or 9 months, automated, that we would be given up to 6 to 9 months to go over to automated, rather than mandated to do it right away.
Okay. The fact that we didn't have RFPs, are we not required to do that? Is there some? I was under
I
the
don't
impression
know.
that there were certain contracts or contract amounts that we were required to get RFPs for. We can't just.
That is possible. All I can tell you is that it did not occur.
Well, my concern is if we're not following some regulation or something. I mean, and I'm not sure how to find that out, but
Yeah.
I think.
I think it's generally our habit to go out to bid for large contracts. I don't know if it's statutorily required. That's a good question that I do not know the answer to. It certainly is preferable when we
Well-
have big contracts.
I don't know if we could ask somebody that.
We can. But as I said, I don't think it changes.
I understand.
What we need to
but
do.
I'm not even talking about the money at this point. I'm talking
Sure.
about us doing it the right way.
Yeah. We very much agree with you that we would like to do things the right way.
Can the municipal associate, maybe the municipal association could help.
We can ask from a retrospective
Yeah.
perspective at this point, sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would comment is, rather than providing max amount of rubbish collection, maybe we do try to make offer less. Like maybe it's not 8 bags anymore. Maybe we do try to cut that down. There are certainly households that don't do anywhere near that.
Yep.
And I think that, everybody needs to feel the pinch a little bit. And I think cutting that amount down is a responsible thing to do, rather than giving people the max amount maximum amount of a cart, maximum size cart. You follow?
Yeah, I agree. And one thing that I'm not totally sure on from this is how much or if at all would that impact our contract? Andy was the one who was working with Brian as the select board member who was kind of assigned to this. It's not clear to me that it would actually be a significant cost savings, although you would sort of assume that it would be, right? If we picked the smaller carts, that it should be a significant cost savings. And I'm just not sure about that, but certainly when I looked at the contract that was sent to us, it wasn't carved out, like if you choose this size cart, it's this much money, this size cart is this much money. I don't think that was as big of a moving part in the contract as going automated was. The act of going automated was the cost savings.
I think what I was trying to get at was if you give them it's like my table at home, right? I have this huge table, so I have it
Oh, yeah.
stacked with tons of stuff. If you give them a big cart, they're gonna fill it up.
Oh, totally.
Try and rein that in, and I think
Yeah.
there should be a concentrated effort to, recommend other things. People are very quick to throw things in the trash that probably don't need to get thrown in
Sure.
the trash, and we all have to pay for that.
Sure.
So if we could, off topic a little bit, but sort of encourage less of that trash creation.
Sure.
Because certainly these numbers have to be based on tonnage.
The waste disposal, it absolutely is. I'm not sure about because I think the Casella number is slightly less related to tonnage, but the bottom part of this budget, the waste disposal, is definitely based on tonnage. So that number would go down if we overall produced less trash as a town.
So it's based on an estimate then to generate that.
The landfill fee, yes, that is definitely tonnage based.
So the
it would.
top two lines are pickup.
Correct. Yep, the first two parts of this budget are Casella for pickup. The bottom part of this budget, which I'll talk about next, is the actual landfill fee where Casella brings our waste to dispose of it in a landfill.
And
That's a separate part of the budget.
is the contract we have, is it with Casella for the waste disposal, for the land, do they cover the landfill
No,
fees?
no.
So who operates the landfill?
That is, we are part of a regional association that contracts together for the landfill. That is, I think it's called I forget what it's called, the Rockingham landfill. And the select board voted 1 or 2 meetings ago to agree to recontract as part of that multi-town alliance that contracts with our landfill. And that's, I believe, also a 5-year contract. So that's what you see reflected in the second part of this budget, which is the landfill fees going up about 5% is the contractual increase for that regional landfill.
And that's separate from Casella, you said?
Correct. Casella just brings the refuse there, but Casella does not own or manage the landfill itself.
They pass through the landfill fee.
Right.
Does.
Well, no, we pay the landfill actually separately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a separate contract that we have with the dump essentially. And that the current dump that we use is likely to continue to be available through, I want to say, 2035. And it is likely that by the time this dump phases out, there will be a dump in Epping, which is likely to be built and be operational by then. So sometime in the next decade, we will talk about actually changing which landfill we use. But for now, we are going to re-enter a 5-year contract.
Who does the school use?
I don't know the answer to that question. We can find out. I do not know.
So it's completely separate from the town operation, I gather.
I can say I looked at the New Hampshire Municipal Association website, and according to their contracting 101 book, there is no state law requiring
I don't think there is.
competitive bidding for municipal contracts unless a connected person, so a state official, is bidding, and it's over $200.
Yeah, I don't think it's required. I think it's just usually preferential. So I just found the information here. So the group that we are part of for landfill is the Southeast Regional Refuse Disposal District, SRRDD. And it is I think there's 8 or 10 towns or more that are in this basically collaborative group, and they have their meetings and negotiate the contracts. And the dump is in Rochester. And if we go below the tonnage expected, we do get a refund. And we did actually receive a refund earlier this year because we had been below the expected tonnage for our part of the contract. And so the board did vote to move forward with 5 more years with the Rochester dump.
To drift off topic a little bit further, in my house, there's a constant misunderstanding about what things can be recycled and what
I
things
think
can't
that's a
be.
chronic issue for a lot of households.
Can that be kind of reinstated?
Yeah,
from-
Casella
from
has, I think,
Casella?
multiple times given handouts and flyers, and I think they've been posted on the website, but we can certainly re-up that again, because I know I have the exact same thing. I can never remember if it has a 5 on it, is it recyclable or not? So I think that, I will say though that our recycling gets audited, and you get penalized if your recycling is very contaminated, so it has a lot of non-recyclables in it, and Brentwood generally does fairly well. So I think we have pretty conscientious recyclers in Brentwood who try to follow the rules.
So the more we can recycle, obviously, that's the less
Yep.
tonnage that ends up in the landfill.
Agreed,
That
yeah.
we have to pay
So we can
for.
definitely make sure those get reposted. I think maybe reposting them every year would be a good idea.
Even holding something public at the library or wherever, presentation from,
Sure.
I mean, if we're paying them
We could
this
consider that.
much, it ought to be a really good dog and pony show from down.
Sure, I hear you.
Okay, because of the size of the numbers here, I think we should vote on each of them separately.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
And I'm probably gonna get tomatoes thrown at me. I'm supportive of the idea of recycling, but I'm not sure how green it is anymore. And I guess my concern is spending additional money on that program when it may not be accomplishing the thing that people think it's accomplishing, for a lot of money. I really would like that to be, I don't know how you look into that.
I think that's a valid question. I think we could certainly go to the voters, and if the voters, if we sign a 5-year contract, then for at least the next 5 years, we're gonna have recycling. I think on the 4th year, we could go to the voters and really inquire if the Brentwood residents want to continue to do recycling. How you exactly get those answers about how green our recycling is, I'm not sure.
That should come
Where you
from
get that,
Casella. That
potentially.
should be part of their presentation, and
Sure.
they should do it in detail, including inviting people to go to whatever plant they use
Sure.
for recycling.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. It is, I mean, in all towns, recycling and rubbish management is a huge part of the budget, and it is in ours too. And so if the voters feel strongly that they want to make major changes to how we handle this, that is certainly something that we could do. The one thing we did talk about the select board is that if the town decided to sunset recycling over Michelle's concerns or just general cost concerns, that it may have an unintended consequence of then really increasing our trash tonnage.
Sure.
And so in the end of the day, you probably would still save money on the bottom line, but it might not be as much as people are expecting, because those things that you previously had recycled would now go into the trash. And so there would be sort of downstream costs that would come from that.
Didn't we vote on this at town meeting like 3 or 4 years ago, or maybe longer?
I don't
felt
remember,
like it was a.
like an advisory. I feel
It
like
might have
at
been
some
an
point there
advisory
was an
vote about,
advisory,
do
but
we want to continue with recycling? I think that was a town meeting.
I think there was an advisory
discussion.
warrant article at some point about that, and it was supported.
I
Yeah.
think, yes, there was, and yes, it was, but things change. And, depending on where you get your information, there's a large camp that says that, I'd be curious how much of our recycling doesn't even get recycled.
Sure.
And again, I'm not sure if we can get that information either. But if our recycling is ending up in the trash anyway, then you know, that's really a
Yeah,
kick.
I think that's
kick
a
in the
valid
face.
future,
I
valid
brought it
future
up not to
discussion.
foreclose your question, just to say, I think because there's a precedent that
Yes.
have discussed this in the town before. Just
Yes, I know that, but things change.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
So, you know,
I get it,
and maybe what was happening 4 or 5 years ago is different than what's happening now.
Sure,
I
I
think we're
think
kind
that's
of
valid.
obligated to look into that.
Well, hearing from Casella would be just a start of that investigation. It would need to go further in order to get the real answer of how the recycling material is being handled. And
I will say, you know, being on the select board for 3 years, I have not ever been approached by a citizen saying that they think we should not do recycling. I mean, I guess maybe I've heard once or twice somebody say, oh, I'm not really for recycling, but it's been maybe 1 or 2 people in 3 years that have said that to me. My general impression is that Brentwood on the whole supports recycling, but that is absolutely something we could bring to the legislative body. At this point, we just wouldn't be able to do that for 4 to 5 years because of the contract that we need to sign. But we could certainly put a thumbtack in that for future discussions of the directionality that the town wants to go.
okay, the contract we're being offered for recycling is $143,050.
We
Is there a,
usually do waste collection together, so the
I
recycling.
know we do, but I
Don't want
think
to.
because of the controversy and the size of the items here, I'd like to do them each individually.
Okay.
If, even though it's going to take us longer than we really want.
After there's a motion and a second, there'll be public
Yeah.
comment. They haven't been motioned yet.
We'll get to you.
I'll make the motion on the recycling.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, and we're looking for, since there's no public comment,
Jim Hasher, Mohawk Lane. I'm just curious, does this include going to the fixed bins or
Yes.
these costs that you have in there?
Yes, so what the select board decided to do, as I mentioned earlier, is assume that we would go automated in 6 months. So
Right.
that Casella's giving us that leeway.
Right.
So when we factored this out, we just averaged the manual number, which was a little bit higher, with the automated number, which
Right.
was a little bit lower, to get these numbers that you see here.
So, and what is this savings to go to automated?
It's not as much as you would hope. I want to say it was like $25,000, $30,000 per contract per year.
And so I tie that back to, because I think Michelle brings up something really good and about the recycle. I mean, as an environmental type person, I support recycling because I was always under the impression that, you know, this stuff is being magically reused, right? But I've read recently that like 5% of the plastic is actually recycled. It's not a large portion that actually gets recycled anymore. And in some cases, the material that's being sent out to these countries to supposedly do recycling, they're just dumping it. Like it's really, so I think it's changed a lot in the last maybe 10 or more years on recycling as being good for the environment. I'm more interested in what is the cost? Like, do you know what is the tonnage of our recycle? Like maybe that's one, because you brought it up, Jen, that it's true. If we stopped recycling, that material is now going to go into the landfill. But to get an idea of that, what is do we know the tonnage right now?
I don't know it off the top of my head, no.
Because that would help, right? Because is recycling, it sounds like it's significantly more
I
expensive
think,
than trash.
you know, to be totally honest with you, the way the select board thought about this is that it's not in the select board's purview to stop recycling,
Right.
right? And so therefore, we felt that we need to enter into this contract to allow continuation of services. And I hear everybody's concerns and think they're 100% valid. And I'm not trying to kick the can down the road, but I think unfortunately I kind of have to, because for us, if we had decided, you know, for example, we want to save this $143,000 by just stopping recycling, our 5-member select board doesn't feel comfortable doing that for our almost $5,000
Which is,
residents.
which is fine, but then I find it interesting that you are willing to save you're making the decision to save $25,000 where, and again, Laura and
I hear you.
personally,
No.
I have no problem with it because it's only the two of us. But I know on my street, there's a lot of families and I see the trash. And in Methuen, they went to this and a lot of my mom and my mother-in-law had no problem because they're by themselves, but a lot of families had problems with the one barrel thing. And it really turned into a problem because they didn't have enough trash, like space in the barrel. And so like I said, I felt that for the $25,000, again, why you feel comfortable making that decision versus going to the voters and telling them like, hey.
Yeah, I don't think that's a set decision. I think
Okay.
if we chose to stay manual, I think Casella would let us, but it would be at a higher budgetary number. So if somebody wants to do a citizen warrant to say, we don't want to go automated, then sure, I think we could do that. And then this budget number would just be slightly too low and we'd have to absorb the excess. Our assumption was that all the surrounding towns are going automated. It seems to be the way of the future. It's what Casella would like us to do. So that's why the board said, we're going to present these numbers as if we go automated in the summer. But I think if the townspeople feel really strongly anti-automation, they could certainly make their voices heard.
Oh, no, it's to me, I have no problem with going to the automated. I just think if you look, I'm looking at it just from a budgetary standpoint. It's very expensive. And I really think that I'd be looking at the recycling and saving money because I really don't think if you do the research, the recycling is doing all that much for the environment any longer. And it's a lot of money, a lot more than the 25,000, I think. All right, thank you.
Well, presumably, we could just not recycle. I mean, we could just,
Correct. That's
Put
what
it
that's
in
what I was saying.
trash.
We could, but at the time of signing this contract, the select board didn't feel comfortable that we could unilaterally make that decision for the entire community.
but meanwhile, maybe the select board could investigate what the consequences would be of not recycling.
We could
So-
ask,
and-
sure,
and-
we could
and
ask
just-
Casella how it would, if we were to drop recycling.
Right.
The thing is, we need to sign this contract by the end of the year.
Yes, yes.
So that's before it
okay,
goes
but
to the
if I-
voters.
At my house, if I just put everything in the trash bin and not in the recycle bin,
Mhm. Some people do that, I'm sure.
Then one more thing I wanted to ask was, when Brian was here before the select board, he said we would not be paying for the cards.
Correct. It's in the rate, it's baked into the rate. It's
Okay,
not a
so we
separate
are
cost.
paying for them. Yeah.
so the other thing
They don't
is-
quote you an amount, it's just assumed. I don't know if they factor it in as X dollars or if it's just part of their overall package that they offer. They don't break it out.
So what he should have said was individuals weren't going to have to buy their own.
Correct, the
bins.
taxpayers
We
do
are
not
most
pay
certainly
directly
paying
for them.
for them, yes.
Probably, yeah, I would assume so.
Just clarifying.
I would assume so, yeah.
So there being a family large enough that they need a larger bin, that we can't be the only town with that problem. So Casella must have a solution to that.
It goes through the town that they can work with the town to set up certain exceptions, that if you have more than so many people in your household or other exceptions, that is something that Casella can work with the town to offer exceptions for someone who needs an extra bin.
Okay,
And that's partly why we did not want to go automated till we have a town administrator in place who can help with those exceptions.
okay.
Becky Dunham, private citizen. When I was here, when Casella made their first presentation, there was a discussion about the large goods, the things that you use to get a permit. What, is that mentioned in the contract, how they're going to, can we still put things at the curb with a fee, or does it go to?
Yes, we did talk about that. And I'm not remembering off the top of my head. I think that was included in these numbers because there was a discussion about whether or not you would still do it with like a sticker or whether we would
Right.
arrange to have people
They could either-
transport their own.
Yes.
Let me just see. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm just going to try to find the contract that was emailed to me.
Yeah, I remember that discussion because there was it Raymond that they were suggesting as a
So let's
location where you
see.
could
For
take
the
things?
proposal, I think, so what was listed on here was the curbside collection, and the recycling, and then bulk waste collection would be, I think it's essentially like an hourly rate and a tonnage rate, so the town would have to decide how they wanted to handle that. I don't think we separately budgeted for that because that was kind of an open question.
Yeah.
If we wanted to encourage people to take their own
You're
to the
right.
transfer station.
Right.
But it looks like they budget that as sort of a, either by tonnage or by hour as a separate cost.
So that would be added on to whatever the contract is.
Potentially. I think that, I think they would only offer this as automated, so we wouldn't even be able to do this till after we went to automated.
Okay, I think
And
that's a
then we could
question,
decide how to do it.
yeah. Because that was a big, there was a lot of discussion about that, as I remember.
Yep, that there's a couple different ways to
Yep.
do that.
Yep.
So I don't believe we directly factored that into this budgeting process.
So I think that might be another area where, as individual residents, you kind of need to just take responsibility for that. And
Save some
it's,
money.
you know,
Yep.
it's in Raymond, you gotta
Yep.
get it to Raymond. We, you know, we don't have to pick up everything.
Yep.
Like, I think the town needs to understand that they don't.
This is an
have to,
expensive
you know,
service.
Yes,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
I mean, we could be going to bags like
Yeah.
Exeter does or other
Yeah.
things. I think
Yep.
that, which
Yep.
I'm not in support of.
Yeah.
But I just think that, you know, you give an inch, they take a mile. So we have to draw a line somewhere.
I think there is a program in Raymond where residents who cannot transport their large goods, there's a group that will do that, will arrange that, so it falls to the individual to pay the $5 fee for a mattress or whatever it is, but people will collect that. They do it 2 days or 2 or 3 days a year, so there's a regular process. So it does save the town the money, so that might be an option to consider.
Sure.
I mean, maybe that's something that, you know, the highway department could have a day like we do with the
That they
with
could
the
help
hazardous
people.
waste day. You know, there's one day
Sure.
or 2 days a year that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think any other option we could do for that, we certainly did not budget for any sort of regular bulky goods collection.
We have a motion and a second for $143,050 for recycling. We're going to do a roll call vote. Jen?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Alina?
I'm actually going to be an A on this. I think we messed up as a town administration without RFP, and I think the contract should be shorter.
Okay, Michelle?
Nay.
And I'm an aye.
Okay, thank you.
Motion passes 3-2.
Next, I'll make a motion for the waste disposal at 505988.
I'll second.
Um,
No,
uh,
no.
Oh, sorry,
no.
my bad, that's the total,
Yep.
at 362938.
I'll second the corrected number.
I have a motion and a second for rubbish collection. Is there public comment? There being no public comment, roll call vote. Jen?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Alina?
Hey,
Michelle?
Nay.
And I'm an aye because I think we need to have collection, unfortunately. Motion-
Before we move on to the next vote, I do want to say I share Alina's concern about the lack of the RFP and that we're sort of
Yep.
voting on a contract with
The
our
select
backs against
board
the wall.
Shares your feelings on
But
that.
I do appreciate all the work that Andy's put into getting comparable data, and I feel like we're not doing this blindly. So I have some comfort in the process while recognizing it could be better.
Thank you.
That brings us to landfill fees, disposal dues.
I'll motion for the 166170 for landfill fees and disposal dues.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Public comment concerning landfill fees. We're now discussing, essentially, we've discussed it, the waste disposal landfill fees, $166,170. That's probably an estimate based on what our tonnage has been.
It is, and I did, when I made this budget line, I did add a slight buffer. So the contract will be going up 4.5%, but I set that line item at 5%, just in case we have some tonnage overage to give us a little bit of a buffer there.
So we have a motion and a second. Public comment?
Who made
I
the
actually
motion?
had a quick question. I'm sorry.
I did.
I
You,
kind of
Brian?
She can go.
couldn't ask. On the
Yeah,
waste
Selena, go
disposal,
ahead.
Did the rate per ton change?
Yes, I think that's the rate that they quote us that goes up is the tonnage per ton rate. Through the Southeast Regional Refuse Disposal District.
Probably based on our past tonnage.
Correct.
Becky Dunham, private citizen. So there are really 4 pieces to this, the rubbish, 3 pieces, rubbish, recycling, landfill.
Yep.
What is the total for the 3?
672,158.
Okay. And how
A
much? are they-
37% increase.
How much?
37% increase.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay. I didn't write it all down, so thank you.
Yep.
We have a motion second, public comment, and now a roll call vote. Jen,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Alina?
Still an A.
Alina's a nay. Michelle?
Nay.
And I'm an aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes.
As I mentioned earlier, if this group is willing to do so, I would love for this BudCom to pass the town administrator budget, which had previously been tabled. It has previously been approved by select board. We do not have it in front of us, but I can pull it up for you guys right here. You guys had wanted to table that, given the thought that we might need to change the salary line for the town administrator. We feel relatively comfortable that that line is going to work for us, so we do not want to change that line. So it is the second budget and on our normal budget packet, and the select board had passed that budget at $135,066. That consists almost entirely of salaries, FICA, Medicare, New Hampshire retirement, with $1,000 for professional training, $150 for books, and a couple of $1 line holds. So essentially is the salary and benefits for the town administrator, with a little bit for professional training and books and dues and subscriptions, et cetera.
So you're thinking the new administrator is going to be in that range,
We're
or is
thinking
something
we
less
will likely
than?
be able to do in that range or less than, to the point that we don't need to inflate this budget to allow for hiring.
And
It's going to depend on the experience of the candidate that we end up hiring.
and you have a feel from maybe surveying?
We have a little bit of a feel, yeah. There's certainly a lot of variability in pay for town administrators across New Hampshire, and a lot of that does reflect the urban versus rural nature, the size of the community, but there is definitely some variability across different parts of the state.
How do you feel about the quality of the administrators or the applicants?
We're getting some good applicants. We've had over a dozen applicants, and they all are from a variety of different backgrounds and different experience. We are hoping, if possible, to hire someone with direct town administrator experience, especially after the select board covering for 2 months. We are definitely looking for somebody to kind of come in and with some of the knowledge that we are lacking. And we do have quite a few of our candidates who have town administrator experience. So we are feeling blessed that we have a pretty good pool of people, and are hoping to move forward in the coming weeks in the hiring process.
What's the training for a town administrator?
I think some of it's on-the-job training. A lot of them go and get a special certification through, I don't know if it's through New Hampshire Municipal or a different organization, as like a, I forget what the term is, but like a certified public planner or whatever the actual, acronym is. I know our prior town administrator had done that training. And so there is some specific training for being, a municipal administrator that's available out there. But it's a big job. I think the select board's got to see that firsthand when it comes to all the HR, the benefits, all the assessing. The town administrator has their hands in just about every part of the town. And so having somebody who's experienced and knows how to work with DRA, knows how to work with Primex, knows how to work with legal counsel, all the different New Hampshire retirement, all the different groups that we interface with, our assessor, our town clerk, to work on getting taxes out. It will really benefit us if we find somebody that has the right type of experience to really help us. And I think whenever you have a changeover, also gives you that opportunity to have a different perspective and maybe some new ideas of things that we could do differently in Brentwood. So we're looking forward to it and pretty happy so far with some of the candidates that have come forward.
Is the administrator essentially doing the accounting, doing the data entry, as it has
No.
been practiced here?
No, Jillian's position, so the assistant to the town administrator does most of the data entry for payroll and accounts payable. And then we have a treasurer that helps with some of the back end reconciliation. I do think that's an area that the select board has talked about over the last couple of years, that in Brentwood, because we have departments of one, right? We have one town administrator, one treasurer. And so I think there is a thought that we need to, over the next couple of years, kind of rethink the division of labor between the town administrator position and the financial functionings of the town. Because in some towns, there is a completely separate person who does all the financials. And the town administrator is focused more on HR and assessing and all the other parts of town administrator. And then a lot of towns, for example, Fremont just recently hired a financial manager. So they have a town administrator and they have a financial manager, and those duties are split.
Full-time people, both?
Correct. Yes, which obviously we have not done in Brentwood, partly due to the expense. But I think we're aware on the select board that there's a lot put onto one single person in the town administrator's office here that maybe doesn't work perfectly. And so looking at over the next couple of years, as we bring somebody new in, how do we get that right balance between the town administrator, the assistant, the treasurer? We had been outsourcing some reconciliation, so do we bring that back in? I think we will really need to make some decisions, and I look forward to working on that with a new town administrator, because they'll probably bring a fresh perspective on how we can best do that in a small town without raising our costs significantly. But it's a balancing act.
Again, the three towns that are close to us physically with a similar population is Northampton, Fremont, and Danville.
Yep, I was actually a little surprised to hear from Fremont that they had just hired a full-time financial manager, but they have recently done. I think that maybe in the last budget cycle they did that.
If I may comment.
Sure.
I think we're better off considering, especially if that's the plan, which I totally agree with, that financial has to be separate, and we're at a space where, in a few years, it's going to be even more so pronounced, let's put it this way, that need with growing departments and so forth, that we will need a financial, professional financial role for the town. But with the administrator, trying to find right now, I'll tell you that for 110, you will not find someone competent in all of those areas. So you'll have to sacrifice some things. And I'd hate to say that, sacrificing finance, I'd hate to see that. But then there's some HR and other items that the administrator, at least in our town, is responsible for, that we would have to either sacrifice or kind of choose which one you rather. Because 110 in the current day and age, unfortunately, for those kind of roles, is not what I would consider adequate. But would it make sense to look into getting more of a consultant role that would help us to clean up and build out those areas and hire proper people and positions into those?
I think that's something we could discuss. Right now, we're talking with our deputy treasurer about what role he may be able to do moving forward. We do have some extra funding in our bookkeeper line that we were using for outside reconciliation, which we are talking about bringing in-house. So we do have some extra funding that we could potentially allocate. So the conversations that we've had so far is about potentially slightly, maybe temporarily expanding the role of the treasurer to take on a little bit more of the reconciliation and financial obligations and keep those off of the town administrator. So we have started sort of the first steps of those conversations. We, in this challenging budget year, obviously did not want to introduce a new position or significant new salary and benefits. But I think, Alina, that we all agree with you that that one person probably cannot do all of those things. It's just probably not realistic to ask that one town administrator to handle every single aspect that is on their shoulders and has been in recent years.
So what has been the role of the treasurer?
The treasurer role has been relatively limited in terms of the treasurer is the only one that can sign all of the checks, do our bank deposits, move money between accounts, release payroll, and do some reconciliation. Although I think it's been a little bit challenging to have enough time to do that reconciliation. So we, as I said, are looking to maybe temporarily expand the treasurer's hours a bit. There is a little bit of, I think, cleanup that probably needs to occur from when we were outsourcing our reconciliation. I think that created some unintended consequences that probably need to be addressed. And so we've been having, like I said, those kind of offline conversations with our deputy treasurer about whether he, with his financial background, might be able to help us clean up some of that bookkeeping work as we bring on a new town administrator. And we do have a little bit of wiggle room in our budget to allow to potentially expand that position a bit.
So we have to be careful with having treasurer do all of that, by the way, just, with the cost control and the separation of responsibilities, because, there's a reason for having different people do different tasks
Yep.
related to finance and accounting.
Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I guess I'm just surprised to hear that I guess I would have expected the treasurer to be doing more of what it sounds like the administrator was doing. I don't know if that's typical or atypical, but.
I can't really speak to that, not knowing how other towns or municipalities do it. I do think in Brentwood, there may have been a little bit too much overlap between those positions. And I can't speak to sort of what's best practice because I don't know. But I do think that as we bring a new town administrator in, we're really hoping to have good clarity on that and make sure we're maximizing the skills and abilities of our treasurer.
Do you have an idea how many hours a week the treasurer?
The treasurer was approximately 1 day per week as a salaried position. I think maybe a little bit more during audit season.
Okay.
You're looking for a new treasurer also, is that you have?
We have our deputy treasurer right now who is filling the role, but we do have an open posting on our website for a treasurer, correct?
You don't have 10 to 12 applicants?
We don't have 10 to 12 applicants. No, we've had a few. Yep, but we're talking with our deputy about what his goals and desires are, whether he wants to remain deputy or might even consider moving up to treasurer. So all those conversations are going on right now.
And do you need 2 people there? You need a deputy?
The idea behind the deputy is that if the treasurer is not available or sick or has COVID or is on vacation, you have to have somebody to sign the checks and somebody to fill in. So the deputy is really intended to be a fill-in emergency coverage person. They don't actually have their own line item in the budget. they just get paid the treasurer's salary when the treasurer is not available, is my understanding.
Is there a motion for town administrator?
I'll make a motion for the 135,066.
Second.
So, hold on, I'm sorry. So how does it work, though? We don't have a person we're hiring, so wouldn't we want, and I'm sorry, this is just me being confused, but this is not adding, this is rehiring. Shouldn't there be more of a town input in terms of how this should be structured, or no?
I don't believe so, because all we are doing right now is replacing a town administrator with a town administrator. So we are not currently doing any major restructuring, partly because of the fact that we are restructuring at the fire department, and doing additional town restructuring in the same year would create major budgetary struggles. So we are really just looking for approval to continue that budget to allow us to hire a new town administrator.
But we're not assuming the same role.
I think that's hard for me to say, Alina, because it's going to be a different human being with a different background and potential different skill set. So I think once we get a new person in here and settled, I think that person will be very helpful to work with us to figure out, are the duties that are on his or her desk appropriate, or do they agree with us that we likely need some restructuring? I think all of us assume we need some restructuring, but it's a little hard for me to speak for a new hire. And I don't know what that new hire's experience would have been in their prior roles. It may be that they'll step in here and say, oh no, this is exactly, I can do all of this. I just don't know for sure until we get that new person in here.
So what happens if you can't find someone for 110?
Then we have a little bit of wiggle room in our budget. We have a $20,000 buffer in the general government budget that we could tap into. But our thought is that we likely will be okay with this budget.
Okay.
Okay,
And
we
we're
have
certainly not looking to increase line items here. We're hoping not to have to do that.
we have a motion and a second. Public comment? On the mic,
Come
please.
up to the mic if you have a question.
So the select board is interviewing candidates. Is anyone else involved in meeting those individuals, like department heads? Do they have input?
Not at this point, because we're just doing preliminary, like screening interviews, and then we're just getting to the point of considering some second interviews. I think as we move forward, yes, that we will probably, when we get to our final stage, will involve other stakeholders.
Right, because I think that helps bring the community together if
Sure.
they feel they're part of the process. And I've only worked in schools, but usually the final two candidates come before the community or the employees to be introduced to see if the karma works. That's a bad word. If the karma works.
The vibe.
Yeah, the vibe. So
Yeah,
just-
we're not at that point yet,
Who's
but we
involved?
have discussed that we would likely involve more stakeholders as we move forward.
Okay, including commission members?
So are you looking for
Haven't discussed.
department head involvement, or are you looking for resident? What are you
Well, that's a good question.
hoping for?
In a school, it's usually, there's was a faculty introduction or time with the candidate, and then general community. For this, it might be department heads and maybe any committee chairs, because I know how much time I spend on projects. And to know that person and ask questions, that would be helpful.
Yeah, the select board can certainly, we haven't yet decided any definitive next step as we're just getting through the preliminary round right now.
Yep.
But I appreciate that feedback.
Okay.
If there's no further discussion from the committee, roll call vote. Jen?
Yes.
Brian?
Aye.
Alina?
Aye.
Michelle?
Nay.
And I'm an aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes.
And then not listed on here, but I would like to make a motion for the street lighting budget for $1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Public
Even Michelle's
comment?
okay with $1.
Public comment? No, they're asleep. No, forget it. Okay. Roll call vote. Jen?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Alina?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Great, thank you.
Motion passes.
Is it pause?
Okay, we can get a lot done while you're gone.
I think I'm gonna.
It's probably good. Okay.
Hey, Jack,
Yes.
we're done with budgets for today, right?
Yes, we're done with the budgets.
Okay. May I have permission to hop off because I'm running low on fuel?
Okay, yes, we can do that. You can hang up if you want. Thanks, Alina.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Alina bailing out. Okay, okay. Other than that, you missed nothing. Jim, we'll do you next, okay? Thank you. I know.
We definitely found it's quite variable depending on the part of the state. Huge variability.
Okay, we're back in session. We're going to jump to public comment. Jim asked to be recognized.
Thank you, Jack.
Identify.
Jim Hazier, Mohawk Lane, but I'm speaking as the chair of the cemetery trustees. It's a general question. This weekend at a town event, someone brought it to my attention that, well, I don't know how to put this, but when I did my budget presentation to both the cemetery budget presentation to this board as well as to the select board, I specifically went over all of the line items, right, in my budget. And there was a 3% cost of living that was set up by the town, recommended by the town administrator. And then there was a 2% merit increase and there was a table that was given to us. I did a 7-page performance appraisal with our employee. And so her merit increase, and I shared it was like 1.7% or something based on her performance appraisal. I was told this weekend that that did not happen in any of the other organizations in town. And I don't know if this is true or not. So my question really is, what is the average merit increase for town employees right now?
That happened, the only people who did not go through that standard process were the department heads, because normally they would have been evaluated by our town administrator, and the other person that it did not occur for is the lieutenant in the police department, because their direct supervisors who normally would do their evaluation were out on leave. So the select board gave those people plus Jillian a flat 4%, so 1% merit. All other departments, I think with the exception of fire, because fire didn't do COLA and merit because they were doing wage adjustments. So that was off. Every other department went through the standard 7-page appraisal, got their scores. There was a variety of scores. I know when the lieutenant was here to present the police budget, he presented, I think, the range of scores. So I can't give you the average off the top of my head, but the only people it did not occur for in the standard fashion was fire, for the reasons I mentioned, and the department heads, Jillian and the police lieutenant, because of the reasons I mentioned.
Okay, thank you. That,
You're welcome.
again, I asked the question only because if it was true, then I thought it was unfair to
would've been
our
unfair.
employee, even though it's only 6 hours. It still would have been unfair, and that I felt like we went through that. So
Yep.
thank you for that explanation.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jack.
Okay, next up is the ad that Steph has prepared. I think that what I sent you today is probably, at least what I would consider the final version. Anybody have any questions, comments, suggestions?
There were two different ones, Jack? Was it
There's
just
two-
kind of choice A and choice B? Was that
No,
the?
no. The large one is I mean, the full, somehow they both came out full page. The one with more words
Yep.
is a flyer. That's going to be
Yeah,
a
this- okay.
standalone flyer. The
Okay.
other is a half page in the BNL.
Gotcha. The one that's sideways.
For, yes. For
Gotcha.
which would have to shrink, I'm sure. So.
Gotcha. That's why it's a little more streamlined.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
So Steph has reserved space in the BNL for that, so. Oh, I see what you're saying. Like the why attend bubble kind of grabs your attention, but you almost need one of those where presentation is, like, what is it? Or what info is presented or something You want
like
to
that.
replace the word presentation with,
Maybe like a similar
Or
graphic.
perhaps remove the graphic of the man with the magnifying glass about to smash the piggy bank and have why attend come all the way across and cover both presentation and public participation, perhaps?
Oh, true, yeah. I see what you're saying, like could lump those together. No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, to kind of make it jump out a little more.
It's just tough to be equally concise, I think, with another.
It could be like what's presented or something like that. Something similar to like why attend.
or to be presented.
You will learn.
Yeah. Yeah, what you'll hear, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that makes sense.
It's packed, actually.
Yeah, you could, to Brian's point, you could remove that graphic and put another bubble at the top of presentation. That might actually be a better use of the space.
You're talking about the
Like if you removed this graphic and instead had a bubble here, like what you'll learn, that kind of mirrored this column. Might be good. What you'll learn. Why, or what you'll hear, or something like that. I think that makes sense, have a bubble there. And I know staff is more than willing to adjust this to whatever we see fit, because she just wants it to work and wants it to try to draw people in. Yes, it was checked. She just double checked it with Daphne. She had checked it with the NHMA calendar, so I think all the dates are good.
Okay, so we want the graphic out of both of them, or just the smaller one, just the B&L one?
At least out of the BNL one, I think you should do something similar with whatever you do, where it says presentation on the small one, do the same thing on the big one. Whether that, the graphic on that one disappears
Or
or
shrinks.
I think the graphic is very busy.
Yeah, I know. Well, I told her that in the beginning. It's busy, but it's not saying really something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Either shrink it or, I mean, I even suggested. Okay. That was for a graphic, by the way. Yes.
See why she developed it, but.
Yeah. Okay, I will see what I can get done here. I think we're probably up against a deadline with the newsletter. Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you for the comments. And budget impact on 400,000, I think we talked about that last week. I'm not sure that there's anything further to be said. I'm developing, or I want to develop the budget impact, a simple definition and understanding, and we'll state it as needed, and so that people know the difference between the budget impact and our tax rate. There's no further comment on that. Our tax rate articulated, we went through the spreadsheet last week. Anybody have any further thoughts, suggestions about that? Questions?
Nope.
Nope, everybody's tired, okay. Yes, reassessment comment I made last week. And I understand we're going to do a direct property assessment as opposed to a.
Yeah, I'd gotten an email from Eric Tur inquiring whether we were doing a statistical or a direct revaluation. And from looking at the RFP from 5 years ago and the new one, it looks to be direct, where it's actual assessment of all properties, not based on some statistical analysis, which is likely to give you a more accurate valuation.
I saw the wording of that, and that certainly is very different than they did, for example, in Exeter, where there are real problems. So I'm kind of hoping that between that and Eric was told, as you know, Eric was told by some people from representatives from surrounding towns that they feel going with statistical was part of the problems
Okay.
that they are having.
So maybe we can avoid some of those pitfalls.
So we have that, I think, in our favor, and also we have much less manufactured housing
Right.
than Hampton, et cetera, and
Right, I know it created some significant problems. We talked about that a little bit last meeting.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, so then the next question is about our next meeting, and given what the select board has ahead of it,
And I think,
Is it possible to?
I think it's up to you. I mean, I think, Jack, that our intention is, so these are all budgets that have already been approved by both Select Board and BudCom. So all that we would be coming to you with is line item reductions, which my assumption is this board would be generally in favor of, right? Unless there was something that jumped out that it would be a hazardous reduction.
no.
So I don't think, I think, well, we could certainly meet earlier if you feel it's important. Or if you feel that that's too close to the public hearing for printed materials or anything like that, we certainly could do it earlier. But I think that if you wanted to do it at that January 27th meeting, I think that would probably be okay.
No.
Because essentially we would probably just
No, I'd
vote
like
to
to move
open
it
all
up
those
to
budgets.
maybe January 6th.
That would probably be too early because we are going to present the concept of this tomorrow to the select board on the 17th. Then the next two select board meetings would be on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So those are tentatively, we're tentatively not meeting. So we would not meet again until the 7th. And so I would recommend it be after that.
So you bring me to January 13th, then.
Correct, if you wanted to move it 2 weeks earlier from where you have it currently on the
Yeah,
schedule.
I would like to do that. Does that work for you? Yes. No, we'll keep it, but if we don't need it, we'll cancel it.
I
Brian,
I
what's
think
the
I could do the
13th?
13th.
It should be, it's a Monday, so it should be fine.
Okay.
Double checking.
And of course, the select board is certainly not promising anything, but we're looking to just make small cuts here and there where we can to try to get our total bottom line down to something that is more palatable
Not
for
a
the
small
public.
distance from where we are to single figures.
I think you'd be surprised because we have a few little tricks up our sleeve. We have some ARPA that we can use that we have to pledge in the next 2 weeks. And so I'm actually bringing a proposal to the select board tomorrow to use our remainder of ARPA to offset our recycling costs is going to be my proposal.
I'm
And
sorry,
to offset recycling costs for the next 2 years.
yeah.
And so I think we'll be able to make, some tiny cuts, some medium cuts, a few bigger cuts, and hope that we can just get the number as low as feasible while still being safe and effective for the town.
I mean, an important part of the presentation is going to be where are our major increases
Mm-hmm.
and why are they?
Yep.
Why are
Letty and I were actually just talking about that today, and the vast, vast majority of our increases is just a couple of places. Fire, due to the restructuring and, try to get that department to thrive. Police, because of the addition of an officer that was approved a year ago. And waste. Those three account for almost all of I think the increases that weren't in one of those three categories are about $150,000, which is just a little bit here, there, and everywhere in different budgets. So when you look at our current bottom line budget, that goes up, I think it's around $800,000. 150,000 of that is just across the budget, and what's left, like 550,000 of that is those three costs that I just articulated. Fire, police, waste is really the big drivers of the budgetary increases.
So the other thing is, I would like to get from Lieutenant Doty and also from Chief Byrd. Well, let's stay with police, for example. I think we need a good explanation of, we have whatever, 12 or 13 people in the department now.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably we're safer. What do we have for a measure of that, how much safer we are? My neighbor mentioned to me the other day, wasn't that long ago, we had 2 people in the police department.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was a lot going on in town that I'm sure nobody knew about at that point in time.
Sure.
And
I think the police department is relatively willing and able to share statistics about arrests, motor vehicle stops, drug arrests, et cetera, to share that information with the public.
yeah.
Fire, I think mostly the numbers they've shared is the number of calls and how that has gone up over time. And I think that when they presented to us, they did share their number of calls, but that, I think that tends to be one of their main communication points is how many EMS and fire calls they've had for the year, which has gone up and up over the years.
And I guess they might be able to look at response times. I don't know if that's tracked, but you know.
Response times, yeah, partly why the Brentwood Public was willing to expand that department was so that we had 2 people on a shift rather than 1, so that we wouldn't have to use mutual aid as much. So I'm sure if you approach those departments with, if there's certain benchmarks that you want to look at, I'm sure they would be willing to work with you on that. And some of it also is safety of our firefighters and officers. So it is the safety of the Brentwood residents, but also the safety of our officers to not be alone on a scene and to not be operating without backup. And I think that's a little bit harder to measure in a metric, but probably easy to measure by talking to the men and women who work in those jobs, how they feel about it. And potentially, you know, someone on an emergency medical call might be able to put into words what you can't necessarily see on a piece of paper, whether it comes to response time or the fact that there were 2 people there instead of 1 person there. I think sometimes it's hard to put a dollar value on some of those things.
Yeah, for sure. In addition to that, though, it would be nice to have numbers which.
Sure. Yeah, they do share some of those, but
which
you
I will
could-
pursue
yeah.
them with them.
Sure.
So,
There's actually more than that because of some underspending on a couple items, the voting machine coming in cheaper, the mold mitigation coming in a lot less expensive than we thought and going into the regular budget. So we are discussing that tomorrow night at our select board meeting. And if you give me 1 second, I can pull up what I spent most of today calculating out as the number, which I'm hoping is the correct number. It is $87,258, if my math is correct, which I am pretty sure it is. My proposal that I'm going to make to my board tomorrow is to split that in half and apply half of that towards recycling in 2025 and half of that in 2026 to mitigate. So it would be around, what, $43,000 a year to mitigate some of that budget line item, given how much it went up. So it would give us a little bit of a buffer for 2 years. You can currently use ARPA for any budget line item for regular expenses, given the new regulations of ARPA. And we had used the bulk of it on capital improvements, but felt, given that this is a tough budget year, at least I feel that's what I'm going to propose to my board, that we use some of that for tax relief. But I will let you know how it goes, because I'm bringing it to them tomorrow. You know, I haven't heard really significant ones. I think some of our capital reserve funds actually may be in slightly better shape than they sometimes are. So we may have a reduction in some of the numbers we need to refill capital reserve funds, but we really haven't looked at those yet because we wanted to finish with the standard budget. I have not heard from any departments any significant monetary warrants. I don't know if BudCom has. I mean, I know you just asked tonight, you know, whether the school was anticipating any on their end. So I'm not anticipating. And if you folks remember, we moved the $350,000 for roads out of a warrant into the budget because it just made more sense. So we will not see that in the warrant. So I can't quote you the exact amount, but I'm not anticipating it to be a huge standalone warrant year.
last year we did 385,000
Yeah.
warrant articles.
Yep.
And so you're thinking that can be
I'm anticipating it may be a little bit less this year. I know there's a couple capital reserve requests that are going to go up, but they don't have big dollar values associated with them, like some new capital reserves. Like I think planning board wants to bring one forward, but it won't have a gigantic number associated with it. So I do hope that the warrants will be on the smaller side this year. But it also depends what gets brought forward. And of course, the citizens can petition warrant articles as well that can have dollars associated with them. So it just depends what comes before us. But I don't know of any big lurking ones, like we had the surprise one for the fire radios a couple of years ago. I haven't heard anything along those lines that's in the pipes, in the works. Fingers crossed. He is retiring / phasing out until we have a replacement plan. So not a straight retire, sort of a pulling back reduction of hours until we have a good replacement in place. And so that will be occurring hopefully over the first few months of 2025 as we hopefully find someone to step into that role. I think you could potentially trim that line item slightly, knowing that he's going to cut back on his hours. I think the risk of doing that is if we hired like a perfect candidate in early January, then that might blow back on us in terms of having cut that line that we now need for a salary. So that's certainly something we could discuss. We just don't know the timing of when we will find someone new or whether we'll have Kip on a reduced hours for a couple of months until we get somebody else in. He's being very nice and flexible with us and doesn't want to leave us in a lurch, but is looking forward to working less in his life, as many people of his age are. And so I had a good conversation with him the other day about him phasing down in hours until we have someone. So yeah, I think we could potentially move that budget line item, but it might just have a little bit more risk associated with it if we cut that line.
Is he a Brentwood resident?
Kip, I actually don't know the answer to that, if Kip lives in town or not. I'm not sure.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Sounds good to me.
Roll call vote. Jen,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Helena is not here. And Michelle, and I'm an aye.
8:23, adjourned. Love it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
That's a